You walk around this building, and everyone is so supportive and so excited about what is happening with the Fever. And you look down the hall.
When the Indiana Fever officially announced they were parting ways with Christie Sides, the entire basketball world let out a collective sigh of relief, because everyone watching could see the growing frustration on Caitlin Clark's face, game after game, and fans celebrated the news, convinced that removing a coach who clearly couldn't handle a generational talent was the final step in turning this struggling franchise into an unstoppable dynasty. But that celebratory atmosphere might be entirely premature, because what the front office is desperately trying to keep quiet is that their supposedly perfect new hire is bringing a massive, potentially destructive problem right to Caitlin's doorstep, creating a situation that executives fear could unravel the entire organization from the inside out. Behind the scenes, Fever management orchestrated a massive, franchise-altering regime change, bringing back Kelly Krauskopf to oversee basketball operations, while Hall of Fame executive Lynn Dunn quietly stepped back into the shadows, all to secure Stephanie White as the new head coach and save their own jobs in the process. On paper, it sounds like an absolute fairy tale ending, since White is a beloved former Fever legend, an Indiana basketball icon who knows the city intimately, and a proven leader who knows exactly what it takes to win a championship in this league. But behind closed doors, executives and league insiders are reportedly sweating over a fundamental, undeniable clash of personalities and play styles between the new head coach and the franchise player, a collision that could turn the upcoming season into the most publicized disaster in sports history. The harsh truth is that firing Christie Sides was the easiest decision the front office ever had to make, but fixing the deep-rooted underlying issues in Indiana without breaking the spirit, creativity, and marketability of their billion-dollar franchise player is a puzzle that might be literally impossible to solve. And to understand exactly why this new partnership is a ticking time bomb waiting to detonate, you have to look closely at exactly what happened the last time Stephanie White shared a basketball court with Caitlin Clark. Just weeks before Stephanie White was handed the keys to the Fever Kingdom and celebrated as the ultimate savior of Indiana basketball, she was actively busy orchestrating the absolute destruction of the Fever's playoff hopes as the mastermind head coach of the Connecticut Sunday. She didn't just casually beat the Fever in the first round of the playoffs, she humiliated them by designing a ruthless, suffocating defensive masterclass that exposed and exploited every single flaw in Caitlin Clark's game on national television. White specifically instructed her players, most notably defensive specialist Dejounte Carrington, to physically exhaust Caitlin, deny her the ball at all costs, and force her into incredibly uncomfortable, heavily contested situations that led to staggering turnover numbers and visible on-court meltdowns. It was a brutal, physical, unapologetic style of defensive basketball that proved White understood exactly how to break the rookie phenom mentally and physically, making the most dangerous offensive weapon in the league look completely helpless at times. During that intense playoff series, there were highly controversial moments of physical contact, heated exchanges, and relentless pressure that left Caitlin battered, bruised, and clearly frustrated with the lack of protection from the referees and her own coaching staff. Now, in a wild and almost unbelievable twist of fate, the very coach who wrote the definitive, undeniable blueprint on how to completely shut down Caitlin Clark is the exact same person tasked with unlocking her ultimate potential and keeping her happy. The irony of this hiring is absolutely staggering, and it points directly to a massive philosophical divide that the front office knows is going to cause immediate, fiery friction the moment training camp opens. Stephanie White's entire coaching identity, built over years of grueling WNBA experience, is founded on intense defensive pressure, gritty half-court execution, and absolute, unquestioned discipline on every single possession, no matter who is holding the basketball. She demands that her players grind their opponents down to dust, leaving absolutely zero room for sloppy mistakes, lazy transition defense, or selfish, undisciplined play that sacrifices the team's defensive integrity for a flashy highlight. But anyone who has watched Caitlin Clark play basketball since her historic days at the University of Iowa knows that her undeniable superpower is the exact opposite of strict discipline, as she thrives in pure, unadulterated chaos, pushing the pace to its absolute limit, taking wild, unprecedented risks, and launching 30-foot bombs with 20 seconds still left on the shot clock. It's that exact unprecedented freedom and reckless offensive brilliance that made her a global superstar, captivated millions of new fans, and shattered literally every single viewership and attendance record the WNBA has ever seen in its entire existence. She operates entirely on instinct, emotion, and momentum, which routinely results in jaw-dropping, highlight reel plays that dominate social media, but also leads to staggering turnover numbers, questionable shot selection, and undeniable defensive lapses that would make a traditional coach pull their hair out. Under the previous regime of Christy Sides, Caitlin was given an incredibly long leash because the former coach was visibly terrified of restricting her star player, knowing full well that upsetting the delicate balance of a fan base that was only tuning in to see number 22 shoot the lights out could cost her her job. When Caitlin missed a crucial defensive assignment, failed to run back in transition, or spent valuable seconds complaining to the referees instead of getting back on defense, Sides would often just clap her hands nervously, pace the sidelines, and look the other way to avoid a public confrontation. But Stephanie White does not look the other way for anybody, and her track record proves that she is not intimidated by superstar egos, massive shoe deals, or the blinding spotlight of the national media. During her highly successful tenure in Connecticut, White proved repeatedly that she absolutely does not care about your viral commercials, your millions of social media followers, or how many replica jerseys you sell in the team store. If you don't execute her demanding defensive system perfectly, you will find yourself glued to the bench, regardless of your name. This is the exact terrifying scenario that has the Fever general manager and front office executives waking up in cold sweats, desperately wondering what is going to happen the very first time. White inevitably calls a timeout to publicly chew out the face of the league for missing a defensive rotation. If White decides to bench Caitlin Clark to prove a point about team accountability and defensive effort, the internet will absolutely melt down in real time, and the front office will be caught directly in the middle of an unwinnable civil war between their billion-dollar asset and their hand-picked, uncompromising disciplinarian. This isn't just empty speculation or manufactured internet drama either, because whispers from connected insiders around the league suggest that rival executives actively warned the Indiana ownership group about this exact, inevitable power struggle long before the ink on Stephanie White's massive new contract was even dry. Caitlin has simply never been challenged by a professional coach with a championship resume, a hardened spine, and a ruthless defensive mentality like White's. And the adjustment period is guaranteed to be incredibly turbulent, highly emotional, and heavily scrutinized by every major sports network in the country. But the boiling tension doesn't just stop with the head coach and the superstar point guard. It aggressively infects the entire roster dynamics and locker room chemistry that the front office has spent years trying to carefully construct through the draft and free agency. You have to look closely at the surrounding cast, starting with Aaliyah Boston, a phenomenal generational post talent who often looked completely lost and frustrated in the chaotic, high-speed, run-and-gun offense that Caitlin naturally forced the team to play during the first half of last season. Boston is a traditional, methodical, highly skilled big woman who desperately needs structured, deliberate touches in the paint to be effective, which happens to be exactly the kind of slow, bruising, half-court offensive system that Stephanie White loves to run and utilized perfectly with Alyssa Thomas in Connecticut. If White decides to intentionally slow the pace of the game down to feed Aaliyah Boston in the post, establish a physical inside presence, and integrate a more balanced, traditional attack, Caitlin's jaw-dropping statistics and viral transition highlights are going to take a massive, undeniable hit. Caitlin is arguably the fiercest competitor in the history of the sport, and she is absolutely not the type of player who will quietly accept a diminished offensive role or passively stand in the corner while the offense runs through the post, creating an immediate tactical nightmare for the coaching staff. And what happened next with the roster construction would only complicate matters further, because you have the looming, highly stressful free agency of Kelsey Mitchell, who was arguably the most consistent, reliable offensive weapon for Indiana down the stretch of the season and into the playoffs. Mitchell proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that she can run the floor with Caitlin and thrive in a fast-paced environment, but she also fundamentally needs the ball in her hands to aggressively create her own shot, adding another massive ego, scoring demand, and ball-dominant presence to a locker room that is already incredibly crowded. The previous coaching staff under Christie Sides completely failed to manage these competing egos and overlapping skill sets, leading to undeniable moments of visible frustration, terrible body language on the court, and highly credible, persistent rumors of a deeply divided locker room where veteran players were secretly unhappy with the intense, suffocating media circus surrounding the rookie. Stephanie White is confidently walking directly into this exact powder keg of unresolved resentment and tactical dysfunction, and her strict, no-nonsense, commanding approach is either going to force these women to bond together through sheer adversity and discipline, or it will completely fracture whatever fragile, makeshift chemistry they managed to build by the end of last year's playoff push. One of the most fascinating and potentially explosive subplots of this entire transition involves NaLyssa Smith, a highly talented forward whose relationship with the organization deteriorated rapidly last season, culminating in cryptic, deleted social media posts, reduced playing time, and visible detachment from the rest of the team. Adding an incredible layer of drama to this specific situation is the fact that NaLyssa Smith's partner is DeJohnai Carrington, the exact same Connecticut Sun player who Stephanie White just heavily relied on to physically torment, harass, and shut down Caitlin Clark during the playoffs. White is now inheriting a locker room containing a deeply disgruntled player whose significant other was just used as a weapon against the franchise superstar, creating a tangled, awkward, and highly sensitive interpersonal dynamic that requires the delicate touch of a master psychologist, not just a basketball coach. If White attempts to salvage NaLyssa Smith's career in Indiana, she risks alienating Caitlin Clark, but if she immediately casts Smith aside to appease her point guard, she risks sending a dangerous message to the rest of the locker room about who truly runs the organization behind the scenes. Waiting nervously in the shadows behind all of this unprecedented locker room drama is a front office that is entirely out of excuses, having played their final, most desperate card to appease the fan base and capitalize on the massive financial windfall that Caitlin Clark brought to the city. Kelly Krauskopf absolutely did not leave her highly comfortable, prestigious executive job with the NBA's Indiana Pacers to come back to the Fever just to watch this high-stakes experiment explode in her face on national television. Lynn Dunn, the legendary basketball mind, who engineered the Fever's lone championship run back in 2012 when Stephanie White was merely an assistant coach on the bench, knows perfectly well that her enduring legacy in the sport is permanently tied to whether this specific roster can bring a championship back to Indianapolis. They systematically fired the convenient scapegoat in Christie Sides, they aggressively brought in the heavy hitter in Stephanie White, and now there is absolutely nobody left in the organization to blame if things go sideways, putting a terrifying amount of pressure on everyone involved to succeed immediately. But the suffocating pressure from the outside world only magnifies the danger of this situation 1,000 times over, because we aren't just talking about local Indiana fans wanting a winning season. We are talking about colossal, ruthless corporate machines that dictate the financial future of the entire sport. Massive global brands like Nike, who just invested $28 million into a signature shoe deal for Caitlyn, alongside Gatorade, State Farm, and the WNBA broadcasting partners, have hundreds of millions of dollars riding exclusively on Caitlyn Clark, remaining the undisputed, smiling, highly marketable face of women's basketball. These corporate behemoths fundamentally expect deep, heavily televised playoff runs, flashy offensive displays that generate millions of impressions, and constant viral highlights that keep casual fans engaged, none of which align neatly with the grueling, defense-first, low-scoring, physical brawls that Stephanie White prefers to orchestrate on the court. If White's unrelenting defensive demands turn Caitlyn into a frustrated, exhausted, visibly unhappy player who spends her post-game press conferences biting her tongue, offering short answers, and desperately trying to avoid trashing the system, the financial fallout for the league and its partners will be absolutely catastrophic. This creates an impossible, maddening ultimatum for the new head coach, who is essentially being asked by her bosses to win a championship immediately to justify her hiring, while simultaneously ensuring that she doesn't accidentally dim the brightest, most lucrative star the sport has ever produced in its entire existence. If Stephanie White chooses to compromise her strict, deeply ingrained coaching principles to keep Caitlyn happy, let the offense run wild, and ignore the glaring defensive holes, she risks entirely losing the respect of the veteran players in the locker room and turning into another powerless version of Christy Sides. But if she aggressively stands her ground, enforces her rules without exception, and forces Caitlyn to conform to a rigid, uncomfortable, highly structured system, she risks alienating the one player who holds literally all the leverage in the organization and the entire league. Caitlyn Clark is completely untouchable from a business perspective, and if a toxic power struggle eventually forces the Indiana ownership group to choose between their brilliant new head coach and their golden ticket to financial dominance, Stephanie White will be packing her bags and leaving town faster than anyone could possibly imagine. The general manager and the returning executives know this dark, inescapable reality, which is exactly why behind all the polished PR smiles, the carefully worded press releases, and the welcoming introductory press conferences, there is a lingering, undeniable dread echoing through the hallways of the Fever headquarters. Adding fuel to this raging fire is the broader cultural narrative surrounding the WNBA, where seasoned veterans, former legends like Sheryl Swoopes, and iconic active players like Diana Taurasi have repeatedly warned that the reality of professional basketball was going to hit the new rookie class incredibly hard. Stephanie White is deeply respected by this older, hardened generation of WNBA royalty, and if she clashes with Caitlyn Clark, the veteran media establishment will aggressively side with the coach, framing Caitlyn as an uncoachable, entitled diva who refuses to play defense or respect the established hierarchy of the league. This would trigger an absolute public relations nightmare for the Fever, forcing them to defend their superstar against the very media ecosystem they rely on to promote their games, while internal trust between the coaching staff and the players completely disintegrates in front of the cameras. Every single practice, every single timeout, and every single substitution during the upcoming season is going to be hyper-analyzed by body language experts, social media influencers, and sports talk show hosts actively looking for the slightest hint of friction between the uncompromising